Hi, we're here today in Venice, Florida, and about ready to start our presentation by Ashley Brown. She will be introduced shortly. This is the League of Women Voters of Sarasota County. And at any minute now, we're going to be broadcasting live as soon as we get somebody up here. All right, we're all set.
Welcome and thank you to the League of Women Voters of Sarasota County. I'm Debbie Blackwell, and today we'd like to welcome Ashley Baker. Or Brown. I am so bad. Oh, she was born and raised in the South, mostly West Virginia and North Carolina. She went and got a bachelor's degree in political science from the College of Charleston, worked in manufacturing in charge of things for the Ohio Transformer in Palmetto, and was recruited to manage the whole thing. And then transitioned into the Women's Resource Center after the Transformers didn't work anymore, I guess. They didn't want her, or they just changed the whole darn thing. So Ashley's an advocate for women, which, you know, it's just perfect. I just transitioned her into this position to just become the CEO for women and really lead in a county that needs a good, strong leader. So for almost 20 years, she's been with the Women's Resource Center, committed to creating a place where women and families can thrive. And we really enjoyed going through and seeing that the center here, and then some people left things for the helping. So Ashley participates in other opportunities for leadership development service, including Leadership Florida, Leadership Manatee, Board for Sarasota Women's Alliance, Ringling College Library, which is really cool, and past chair of RCLA Town Hall, and the former board member for Manatee County League of Women Voters. So please welcome Ashley Brown.
Great introduction, thank you. And Baker, I like it. It could be my alias. Hello, ladies, and hello, anybody who's on Facebook Live. I am so happy to be here, and I am so happy to be here at a time where there is so much to talk about. And who came up with what is the ballots? Grab 'em by the ballots. Very clever. I like that t-shirt. I'm not wearing a tank top, but so again, I'm Ashley Brown. I am and have been the CEO of the Women's Resource Center it'll be 20 years in November, which seems impossible. I think something that really re-energized and re-engaged me is when we merged Manatee and Sarasota County. So it gave a whole new opportunity and things to fix and solve. And then we really started working on issues impacting women's ability to support themselves. And when you start digging into this and some of the information I'm going to share with you, you're going to know why I'm still as actively involved, as passionate, and as committed to making a difference for women and families. Because there is a huge gap in the opportunities and the needs. So I'm going to give a high level, and then I really want some questions. I want some discussion. I was on the board of the League of Women Voters in Manatee for many years. I'm a proud member of the League. The work that the League does in informing people is so needed and necessary, because educated voters is really vital. I know, Tina, I'm already going to call you out because we were talking earlier. You know, I think we thought 7 or 8 years ago that we really had issues to discuss. Ha, 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 ha. Do you think that is just like it's kind of like I wish I were as fat as I thought I was in high school. It's kind of that same premise of wish those were the issues that we were still dealing with. So I'm going to start with money. And I'm going to start with the economic reality for people in our community and some of the things that are going on legislatively to maybe support some of that change. Does anybody read the Alice report, or does anybody dig really into the Alice report from United Way too? So for the rest of you all, when I say Alice report, does that ring a bell? So yes, no? I love the no's. I'm sorry, yeses. Because it just gives the opportunity to educate. Government working. Federal poverty limits were established in the 1960s, and it was established based on some criteria of that time, like some of the basic household items, food items, etc. Would you be surprised to know that the federal poverty limit has not had an overhaul since the 1960s? Right? A couple of things have changed since then. So what the United Way, and it started in New Jersey, and it was Rutgers University and United Way, working on an in community, New Jersey first, on what does it really cost to live in a community. So federal poverty limit aside, how much does it really cost? And I think that was in 2009, but I do know that in 2015 is when the report came out that included the state of Florida. So that was the first time that we really had, this is how much it costs to live in the state, this is how much it costs to live in a county, and so it's really drilled down. It will not be surprising to you, I don't think, to know that 40% of families actually it's like 41% of families in Sarasota do not earn enough money to live here. Anybody want to guess the most represented gender in that 40%? Women, yeah, not to blow it, but it's women. The most represented is female head of households. 78% of female head of households do not earn enough money to live in this community. That's a problem. That's a problem, because when we look at the feminization of poverty is real, and when we look at industries where women are overrepresented, food and beverage, service, so, we have lots of work to do kind of at a ground level to address. But then there are things like childcare subsidies and the importance of childcare subsidies to help working families work. And if you can't afford to pay for childcare, how are you going to go to work? You're going to be that mom that we've seen on the news that got arrested for abandoning her child because she was afraid she was going to get fired and her babysitter called out. So, we all see these cycles. And today, 2 weeks ago, Sarasota County Commission, who restructured the advisory boards to make recommendation fundings for nonprofit service providers, went against the advisory board recommendations, and we're going to defund many organizations, Boys and Girls Club, our Mother's House here locally, some of the programs at Laurel Civic, and $510,000 from Early Learning Coalition that are not only pass-through dollars, but matching dollars. So that $510,000 was pulling down $510,000 from the state. So over $1 million of pass-through dollars that went directly to providing child care to families who can't afford it. So, and anytime you have questions, just throw your hand up. I'm fine taking questions. So trying to quantify, and I think that is going to be reversed. They at least got put back on for consideration of funding today. I wasn't able to stay for the final vote. Does anybody know how it went? So we'll know. But there was an outcry from the community, and my Pollyanna self wants to say the commissioners need more education of understanding what they're at. That's my Pollyanna. Then I have the other side that I use those privately words that make me feel better. But when you look at, and I'm just going to take childcare as this one issue because women are still the main caregivers for children, aging parents. It's just the way it goes. And if women aren't able to have access to quality childcare, they're not working. The Florida Chamber Foundation, so this is a Chamber of Commerce for the state of Florida, pro-business, their foundation participated in a national report research project that put an economic impact number based on the availability and inconsistency of childcare. Anybody want to guess the number of the economic impact for the state of Florida last year because of lack of access? Millions?
I would think many millions of dollars.
There's a B. $5.3 billion. So when we look at something that's, seems like, well, philanthropy should take care of this, or families should take care of this, or it is a real driver, an economic driver, an independence driver for women to be able to work and earn enough money to support themselves and their families. So I'm happy to share, Debbie, with you. There's a couple of reports I'm going to talk about today, and I will share them with you that you can send them on. So on childcare, there were a lot of people there advocating. Fiona McFarland is a Republican legislator, but she listens. We meet at least once a year talking about the issues around benefit cliffs, which that's going to be my next fun topic, and issues that impact women. And it's different. Women approach issues differently, and we need more women representing us when we look at what are the laws, what are the policies, what are the things that are impacting us. We can't expect men to think in terms of what's best for women. It just is not a natural occurrence because they're not living it, right? So encouraging more women to get involved in running for office, representing is an amazing opportunity we have. Getting more women registered to vote. And I know that's something that the league really is working on. And I appreciate and want to thank you all for being resilient, and no matter how difficult the barriers to get people registered to vote are coming up, that you're working around it. You're still out there beating the drum, getting people registered. So, because if we're not engaged in the voting process, nothing's going to change, right? And it's easy to see why people get disgruntled and are just like, does it even matter? Yes, it matters. So benefit cliffs. When I say that, is that more of a what is she talking about? So again, and I have to give, and I was able to give him credit in person when we were speaking together, but Mark Wilson, who is the CEO of the Florida Chamber, gave a presentation at an event I was participating in Orlando, probably 2017 timeframe. And he started with the question, is it better for a family of 4 or a working mom, single working mom, to make $62,000 a year, or, I'm gonna make this up, this is not correct, so don't come back to me, or $32,000 a year. $32,000 a year, because then they qualify for child care subsidies and housing subsidies. So the state of Florida has an off-on switch when it comes to benefits. So that means here's the amount, and if you make a penny, 25 cents, 50 cents over that amount, all of your benefits go away. And if we really want, which if I polled each of you individually, I'm thinking 100%, we want people to have the ability to support themselves. No one wants to, I don't believe that people choose to be on benefits. I think that there's a whole different lived experience for people who grow up in poverty that I can't relate to, so I can't speak to that. But in general, we see lots of hardworking people continually getting pushed back. And that benefit cliff, fiscal cliff, is the big piece of it. So bank tellers are a huge population that gets hit with this because they start as a bank teller where they qualify. And an aside, if anyone saw Katie Porter from California take on the CEO of Wells Fargo, just Google it. It's pretty amazing. But on the fact that banks can't afford to pay their tellers a living wage, because banks certainly aren't making money. That'll be great on Facebook Live. But their income is such that they qualify. And if it's a hard worker, they're making progress, they get the opportunity for a raise and a promotion, they have to say no or work part-time, reduce their hours, because we're asking them to make the choice between childcare or working. That doesn't even make sense. Yes?
There's a comment that came up about how there's no limit, income limit on school vouchers, or the vouchers that are now in place. So it's kind of like...
Oh, that's a whole different...
Right. But just as a comparison of how wackadoodle things are.
Yes, we will talk about that, the charter school and the tax, or not the tax credit, just money for the voucher funding for private schools or homeschooling. Yeah. It's hair pulling. So anyway, on the benefit cliff, we started educating and meeting with our local representation. And actually, Joe Gruters and a senator from the East Coast co-sponsored a bill in 2019 that did not go through, but in 2020, we had Senator Boyd, Representative Robinson out of Manatee County proposed a bill. It passed, but it passed to evaluate. So we're now in year 2 of evaluation. And I get that it's not simplistic, because it's really easy to say, okay, everybody gets $300, or when you reach this limit. And then when it gets to, I'm gonna get $250, you're gonna get $125, it becomes way more complex. So the Federal Reserve out of Atlanta is involved in this, as well as, it'll be in the report that I send you. Tina, you might know, it's the school at UF. It's a leadership school at UF that's in University of Florida that's involved in really evaluating how changes can be made to adjust the social system, starting with child care subsidies, because that's the kind of elephant in the room, to create a glide path off of support rather than that off-on switch. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
So we'll see how it goes. And when we talk about things that make sense to both sides, make sense on rational thinking. Those are the things that makes sense. Giving people a path to keep working, making more money, it just bringing more into the economy, all of those things. But we have to be aware of it in order to make sure we keep moving forward. So I think that the child care subsidies are just a huge opportunity for helping young working families. There is a bipartisan bill in Washington. It's the Child Care for Working Families Act, and it does have one Republican and 2 Democrats currently sponsoring it. I've met with Congressman Buchanan's office, and we're working on a sit down to try to get him engaged in moving that. And the marketing messaging that's needed to talk to people, I think, is really important too. Like, how do we talk about these issues, and how do we get people at the table willing to talk about the issues are going to help us move forward a bit. Which sometimes I want to use a bat, but it's not as effective, I have found over years of saying that did not work out for me. Okay, any questions before I move on from childcare? Who wants to talk about economic insecurity for elder women? What a fun topic. So, I know. AAUW, and this was 2019, this report came out. So it was specific for Sarasota County. The Community Foundation of Sarasota and AAUW funded a report on economic security for elder women in Sarasota County. It is not a pretty picture. It is, when we talk about that 40% of people that are struggling, again, 65 and older have more people that are above the Alice line, but those that are below are predominantly women and single women, and women surviving only on Social Security payments. So at the Women's Resource Center, anybody who calls in is heartbreaking that's struggling with something. You know, you can't help but have empathy. When an 85-year-old calls that can't afford her condo association fees, or the reserves went up because insurance and they have to replace a roof, that's pretty devastating. So, you know, you think you did all the things right, you planned for it, and here you are without security at age 85. I mean, it's just, there's just something special, heartbreaking about that. So what can we do about that? Gender wage gap is an issue. Women still earn less than men. Savings, building assets. If women are divorced with children, how many times do you think a woman is going to choose to make sure their kid has the whatever they need, or gets to go to the band concert, or gets to go on the field trip, versus putting money in savings? It's gonna go to the kid. I mean, it just is, it's a natural state. So how do we talk about asset building, finances, and then how do we start talking about that way earlier with everybody, but women and girls? So young girls, and the importance of having financial security, savings, money, spending, all of it. This is not sexy stuff, I know, but it's really important stuff. So I think that we have an opportunity there to change the narrative. Again, opportunities for legislation and systems change that give more people the opportunity to have that extra income, and making education affordable and accessible. Are we allowed to use accessible anymore? I know we can't use diversity. I'm using it. But it is in terms of, the words that we make bad. I don't understand, because really having access doesn't mean free, or you're going to get something that I'm not, or because I get it, you don't get it. The importance of having a training or certification or a degree that's going to lead to a career where you can make a living wage is important. And the fact that so many more women are in, and I'm gonna challenge you. When you go to a fine dining restaurant, how many of the waiters and waitresses, men to women in fine dining? Mostly men. When you go into a Perkins, how many women versus men? Right, it's like weird, and I have to tell you, my husband was the one that pointed that out to me, which he is a girl dad and extremely pro-women. So, and I talked to friends of mine who own restaurants, and it's like, why is this, and what can we do to change that? Is it training? Is it, but when you start kind of peeling back the layers on stuff, you're just like, this is interesting, and why is this? So what can we do, even if food and beverage is what this person loves? How do we ladder them so they get to the point where they're making a living wage? I think that that's just something that we have to be participating in, asking questions on. What are the opportunities for? What are the supports that are needed? And then how can we leverage our resources to make sure that we're giving people the skills, the tools, and the knowledge to make different choices? Because behavior's in there. When we look at people that are struggling, there are some factors that they have no control over. Cost of housing. Holy man, after the pandemic, what housing has done in our area, you can't control that. And it's I don't think we're ever going to get subsidized rentals or anything like that. It's just not, I don't foresee it. But we want people who work here to be able to live here, because it's also not sustainable to drive from Mayaca to Siesta Key to work. And then Northport used to be the affordable place. Anybody want to talk about how affordable Northport is? Right? I mean, everything, cost of groceries, all of that. So there's that piece that we don't have a lot of control over. But our behaviors, our choices, our decisions, we do. And I say that not with judgment, but just with personal responsibility is an important part of life too. So if we're, is that additional training? Is it mental health supports? Is it, there's lots of things that go into that. And having access to services when you need them is really important. And blending private dollars, philanthropy, and government funding is necessary. We can't have one without the other. And I think writing to county commissioners, writing to city commissioners, writing to state legislators to let them know where you stand and what you're concerned about. It matters. You might not get the change that you want, but at least you put your voice out there, which I think is really, really important. Okay, before I go into my next thing, any questions on the economic insecurity for older women? Which is terrible. I hate even saying it.
No, I was going to talk about children.
Oh, sure, you can talk about that too.
The child tax credit
Yes.
reduced poverty for children by 50%, and then when it stopped, it increased. Is there anything that you or other advocates are doing to try to get that back in?
Other than ask, because it's great questions, on the child care tax credit.
The child care tax, not
The child
care-
tax credit.
child tax credit that was passed in the Biden administration during COVID reduced poverty in children by over 50%, and then it was eliminated last year, and then poverty rate went right back up to 50%. So I'm wondering if advocates are pushing our Congress people to get that back in, because I mean we're talking about all of the different needs that families have, but having a little bit more income makes the difference in being able to keep a house, keeping them from being homeless, being able to send the kids to school, and being able to work.
Which is, you know, that's a great topic to write. Is Stubby your rep?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, he is.
The recording. Anyway, I would encourage you to write, and you know the groundswell of. I mean, we're certainly, when we look at the issues that the Women's Resource Center is talking about public policy wise, child care, the tax credit, affordable housing, benefit cliff mitigation, that fiscal cliff, mental health, Medicaid expansion. I mean, we're what, you're gonna know this, come on Tina, are we one of 5 states now that hasn't done the expansion? That's not a statistic to be proud of, is it? And another thing that we might wanna do is, hey, governors, we're part of one country. Maybe have a collective response to things instead of fighting with each other. Like that is, like some of those, the things that are happening just seem unfathomable, right? And it just is, I'm hoping, again, my Pollyanna, that enough people are just astounded by some of the stuff that's happening, that more qualified people will run for office. And how is it, of 350 million people, that are current, and let's be clear, there's no question, but these are our 2 top people to lead our country. It just seems like there have to be more qualified, capable, engaged individuals to run for office, and at every level. And I remember, I'm going on a tangent, but I'll come back, I promise, hearing Gloria Steinem speak at a Center for Women event in Tampa. And this was 2016 maybe. I think it was before Trump got elected or right after. And she said, you've got to stay focused on local and state. And I think there was so much noise and fear and what at the national level that at the local and state level we're now dealing with issues we never thought we would have to deal with. And people got elected that you don't want an elected position to be the best job somebody ever had. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you want somebody to bring experience and smarts and ideas and those things to the table, and it's just like, how did this happen? And I go back to Gloria Steinem saying that and going, because I was one of those people, there was what is happening, and it just was so much noise that all of a sudden, I think the ramifications are we have local and state elected officials with supermajorities all over the place that are doing real damage that's going to take decades to unravel. Am I your uplifting speaker for this? But it's, I mean, it's just the reality, and I think that's why it's so important that we do get engaged. One of our efforts in 24 is going to be elevating women's voices and talking more about how do you get engaged civically, whether it's serving on the PTA, volunteering for the library, running for office, and why it's important to have women's voices at the table. And where I'm gonna slide into, and I'm gonna be honest with you all because I'm always honest, it's just the better policy. I saw a interview, I think it was CBS Saturday morning, it might have been Sunday morning, with a feminist from the UK that's written a new book, and she's kind of a comedian and feminist, and she's kind of, they likened her to our Tina Fey. So, and she's written several books, but her new book is What About the Men? And it was a really compelling interview on the opportunity we have to educate and bring men along with us, so that the men are also advocating and talking about the issues that are important to women. And as it goes, once you get one thing, now I'm seeing it kind of everywhere. So I pre-ordered the book, and I'm really interested to read it, and thinking about the, you know, men in my life who are feminist and who are very supportive. Are we educating young boys and men on the importance of women having their place, their role, and, you know, their path? And I think it's kind of, it's an interesting point. So I say that with, I don't have a lot of information other than I'm interested to continue that conversation. Because if we don't start grassroots conversations on how we're going to change the narrative, we have to. Like, what are our choices? We're all moving somewhere? Canada? I don't know. So I do want to talk a little bit about the Women's Resource Center and the things we're doing aside from the advocacy piece, which is a big part of what we do. We want women and families to have financial security. So understanding what those barriers are and helping women overcome them is really important. Oftentimes it is a combination of things. It can be lack of education, it could be mental health issues, it could be divorce, which I did not talk about alimony, I'll go back to that in a minute. It just could be the number of women who have to step out of the workplace for caregiving. And caregiving is not just children. Caregiving of elder parents. How many have had to do caretaking for elder parents? Right? And again, it's women. I am the only girl. I have 2 brothers. I love my brothers. It's okay. But when it came time for Mom to need more help, she moved from South Carolina to Florida because then she would be close to me, because obviously, and I am really not that good of a nurturer. So I'm a terrible wife. Like, food, do we need it? Somebody going to the grocery store? Who's doing that? But we have a wonderful caregiver, but we have the means to be able to do that. And every time Kelly, who's amazing, goes out of town or I'm stepping in, I think to myself, what does the person that doesn't have resources do? What's the person that's having to still go to work, figuring out what to do with their mom with the dementia, putting food on the, you know, I can't even imagine. So when you've had to step out of the workplace and you've lost all those years of earning, all those years paying into Social Security, all of those things, let's be radical. And what if we proposed Social Security credits for caregiving? Ooh. Is that a little radical? I know, say like, yes. And it doesn't, again, when we talk about tax credits, it can make the whole difference. And the tax credits were not, you know, it helped people get back more money, which is then went into savings, which then gave them the ability to stretch their budget. And I think whoever the smart person was asking about the vouchers, the education vouchers, when we can give $8,000 a child, why can't we do the same for caregiving, children, etc., regardless? So there's a lot of opportunity, and it starts with who we're electing. So again, thank you for the work you're doing in that regard. I appreciate it. So back to Women's Resource Center. So it really is, we meet people where they are, because it's not like we have the same client coming in every day. So we have a variety of services, including career coaching. We have a really robust scholarship program that ties an advocate, mentor for the student. We have affordable mental health counseling. People are able to get mental health for as little as $5 at the center. The most it is $40. So if you don't have insurance, or your insurance doesn't cover mental health counseling, we're an option. We have career closets, so thank you for those that donated to the career closet. And then we do resource advising. So we're often that first call people make when they aren't sure where to go. And we have wonderful staff and volunteers and a very robust referral list. And we like to make warm transfers for people that need help that we don't provide. So if it's a domestic violence situation, housing is the #1 need right now, and there's just no good answers there, but we at least are able to get people on waiting lists or get connected to the right resource. So there's lots of things in the resource advising world that we do. When the center started in the 70s in Sarasota, the late 80s for Bradenton, Manatee County, divorced women were kind of the target population. Women getting divorced and striking out on their own. A couple of years ago, my program manager said, that's not really that's not a big need anymore. And I'm like, it is a big need. And we do quarterly divorce workshops that involve the legal aspect of divorce, the financial aspect of divorce, and the emotional aspect of divorce, and then parenting, the blended, co-parenting piece. We have at least 50 people sign up every time. This time it was like 84. So the need is still there. There was legislation to change the alimony laws in Florida. Are you all familiar with? I might be controversial in my thoughts on this. I am not a fan of permanent alimony. And I'll tell you why I'm not a fan of permanent alimony. I'm a fan of transitional alimony to help provide, again, I'm a big fan of that path. If you were a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, you're going to need a pretty significant amount of time or money to make that transition to supporting yourself without your spouse's income. The reason I don't like permanent alimony is it gives the spouse, whoever that would be, but traditionally it's men, the ability to come back at least once a year and challenge your alimony, and they have access to all of your financials, anything you have. If your parent dies, they have access to all of the estate planning and how much money did you get and how is that going to change. And it is, if you have divorced this person, there's probably a good reason, and you don't want them in your life permanently. So that's my personal, I think, a reasonable, fair alimony that works and is court approved. I am a strong proponent of that. But I think permanent alimony sets women up to be insecure on their financial feet because they're always worried about, I have a friend who, her ex-husband takes her back to court every other year. Who wants to do that? And then you have to pay the attorneys. So anyway, I know that that might not be the most popular view on permanent alimony, but it's mine. I think you negotiate and you get that time to become stable, and then bye. We don't have to see you again. All right, I've given you a lot of information. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to engaged women always. So any other questions as we're about 10 minutes?
So the services that you talked about, mental health and other classes and stuff, are those available to both men and women?
Yes.
Okay.
The only thing that men can't do, oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's
Moving around.
no problem.
The only thing that men cannot participate in are support groups because it throws off the dynamics and the divorce group. But we have Ask an Attorney programs. So you can meet one-on-one with an attorney for, I think it's $10, and ask any question on family law. So men can participate in that, but not in the group setting. But individual counseling, couples counseling, career coaching, any of that, resource advising, and about 4% of our clients are men.
And how are you funded? Because you have some incredible services and programs, and other, I don't, other than what you might get from the county commissioners or might not get,
Did not get, our funding got cut from Sarasota, but we do not get a lot of even county funding. About 2% of our budget, and our budget's just under $2 million. So we're a small but mighty organization. We don't get any state or federal funding. We're truly supported by philanthropy in our community. And we have an amazing resale shop in Bradenton that makes up about 10% of our budget, which is nice. Yeah. I know, which is great. So individual giving, the $25 to the $30,000. So, having the opportunity to talk about what we do. Thank you for that question. I always forget to talk about funding and things like this because I'm so focused on how can we change the narrative for women. So, good question. Who else has questions? What do we think about the bringing the men along? Yeah, no?
Many years ago, when I was involved with domestic violence work,
Yeah.
they were really trying to get, when I was involved with domestic violence work, we were trying to get boys and young men involved and teaching them how to be good partners and not be abusive, and to relearn the kinds of negative messages that they were getting from the society about the role of girls and the role of boys and women and men. So it's like everything old is new again.
Right.
I think one of the things we have to look at as we go to school board meetings and be advocates for children is what is being taught, what's in the curriculum that they are looking at, and is it approvable to promote an educated, caring society that is equal rights for all.
So interesting, when I said, once I saw that interview, things started popping up, and I was talking to a group at work, and a gal sent me an Instagram reel last night, and it was a man saying 90% of violence is committed by men, which is true, and he was like, we had a friend who, so that's in a group of 10, that's a lot of us that could be the potential that men have to start calling men out on behaviors. And he was, I guess, somebody in a group was convicted of rape, and he's like, we knew he did not respect boundaries in women. We should have said something. So even just calling on that, holding each other accountable for our behaviors, I think, and talk about uncivil, like school board meetings and things these days that just mean-spirited. Like, we can have conversation without tearing each other down, even if we disagree. So, do you have a question? Are you a loud talker, or do you need?
No, I'm pretty loud.
Oh, good.
I'm pretty loud. I'm just thinking, what can we do to bring men along? I think probably the number one is, how do we break the good old boys network? How many stories have you read and books have you read where it's, I cannot go behind my father's back? I could never go behind my friend's back. So men stick together, women, we're like all over the place. We're crazy. Really, we couldn't even get Hillary Clinton elected. You know, we had our chance, and boy, we stuck with the men.
So I was a home ec teacher way back when they had home ec. And one of the things we did is we did a lot of this kind of thing about, you know, giving people choices, teaching them about economics, teaching them about what they can do. And it's important. I don't think we're getting any of that in the school anymore. And I'm really disappointed because, you know, we gave basic kind of stuff that kids don't get anymore. And they're not getting it at home. So again, I think it's back to the schools, back to education, and making sure that we get what we need in the schools, and it's important to get those educators in there.
Well, and pay educators.
Absolutely.
Pay educators. So I was watching a thing on Netflix the other night with Johnny Manziel. I don't know. So my husband and I were watching, and his father said, and Johnny Manziel was a quarterback with Texas A&M, went on to the NFL, totally went off the cliff, drinking, drugs, bad behavior, which started when he was at Texas A&M. And his dad said, you know, we gave him to the coaches, and then the coaches, it was their job to do, and I stopped. And I'm like, what do you mean it's the coach's job? Is that a parental, like, I think that transfer of responsibility of who's raising our kids too. And I think that happens with lack of childcare, lack of all the things that you're exhausted. You're just like, thank God they're at least in school and they're going to teach them something. So, you know, when you start peeling it back, there's a lot of reasons. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. But I like how you're following this.
I guess my question is, why would anybody be a teacher? You're going into a war zone unarmed. And I have been in war zones, but I've been armed. So that's the answer to the teacher. I think anybody going into teaching right now needs their head examined.
And yet we need them more than ever. Especially to be courageous and stand up.
Well, and it's interesting, my stepdaughter made the comment of how much anxiety she has sending her kids to school. So, like, anxieties that we never thought about.
You don't go to
Before.
a movie now without checking how you're going to get out.
Okay, well, now I'm not.
So I agree. I think it's critical to educate men or boys to bring men along. I think we almost need talking points from a man's perspective to bring them along. We have to find the men who are pro-women, all
Decency?
decency, whatever, to help us engage men in that conversation, because so often we're dismissed.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Maybe given a project for my male board members of like why, and
That is a good
you know, we have a couple of board members who are male, and they're really passionate because they were either raised by single mothers and lived firsthand the importance of supporting women, or, you know, so I don't know, I think I'm going to bring that. This is all new in my head, so we'll see. Any questions before I kind of wrap us up? So one of the things that kind of in every time I'm talking to people these days, there is so much noise, and there's so much that get people lathered up. And I just encourage, and this has kept me sane in my bipartisan friend group, if we're not talking about affordable housing, quality education, access to childcare, strong health care, and earning a living wage, why are we talking about it? Why are we spending any energy discussing things, and climate, clean water, climate. But if we're, the fact that we're talking about access to reproductive health care for women, the fact that we're talking about indoctrinating, it just is not moving us forward. And the things that move us forward, they're big issues that we need to address. So it shut down one or two conversations and kept me from getting in fights. So maybe it will do. And I think collectively, if we keep questioning, why are we talking about these things that they don't matter? They're not, and it's not your business. So anyhow, that is my kind of closing of encouraging you all to keep up the work. Again, thank you for what you're doing. I'm going to send Debbie some reports that you can dig into and enjoy, and I'll send you the book too. So thank you for letting me be here with you today.
Ashley Brown, Women's Resource Center, Venice, Florida, Sarasota County, and Bradenton. Now, just a few more words. We have Ruth Brandwine that wants to talk to us about abortion. Like we didn't do that 40 or 50 years ago.
Right.
Well, Ashley was a great way to move into this, because if you're talking about women and our right to be ourselves and have our own lives, we have to make a choice. I myself had an illegal abortion in 1966. I was divorced. I was using contraceptive, but I was using it wrong. And I did not want to marry the man I was seeing, but he helped me, and I was able to get to Mexico and get an abortion. I didn't know if I'd survive it, but I knew I had 2 babies, 2 little kids, and I didn't want to have another. It turned out I would have had twins. If I had 4 kids, my life would have been completely different. I would have gone on for my master's, my PhD, and had a wonderful life. So anyway, I didn't mean to get personal, but it all comes down to the personal is political, right? So that's why I am very much involved in this petition campaign. And I know some of you were at lunch, so pardon me if I'm repeating myself. The petition is to get a referendum on the ballot in 2024. We believe that since 70% of Floridians support abortion, that if it's on the ballot, it will pass. It's a very simple petition. It says, no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability, or when necessary to protect the patient's health, as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. This amendment does not change the legislature's constitutional authority to require notification. They had to put that in because they couldn't have gotten otherwise, to a parent or guardian before a minor has an abortion. So basically, what it says, viability is usually 24 to 26 weeks. They didn't give the exact date because it can change. Not the same for every woman, but it's the healthcare provider. So basically, when I do petitions, I tell people, we want to keep the government out of our lives. And a lot of people, no matter what their political beliefs are, they don't want the government interfering with them. So we say, we don't want the government to tell us what to do. This would prohibit the government. So I have petitions. If you haven't signed it, please sign it. If you have signed it, please take some and give them to your friends. I also have these cards, so you can go online if you are good at doing this kind of stuff, and some of us aren't, where it will give you the petition, you can download it, and it gives you the instructions. You have to be really careful about how you're doing it, because if it's not done exactly correctly, they'll throw them out. We need 891-something thousand petitions signed by the end of December. We now have over 600,000, maybe more. That was a few weeks ago, we had 600,000. But we want to collect over 1 million because of things that are not done exactly right. People's signatures change, or you have somebody sign it and you forgot to put the date in. You cannot do anything with it. It has to be done by the person. So if you're interested in doing petitions, please see me. I will be happy to give you a 2-minute training on how to do it. But it's very important, and it can make a difference because that 6-week law will probably go into effect. You know, the Supreme Court of the state is now considering it. They haven't given the answer, but given the makeup of the Supreme Court now, the state Supreme Court, which most of the members have been appointed by either either DeSantis or Scott before him. So we don't have much. So that's why we're doing the petition. If by some miracle they throw it out, then we don't make a petition. But this would be in the Constitution that would protect a woman's right to make her own decision about abortion. So that's really important. There are other things that we're doing in the health committee. Sorry, the Sarasota Memorial Hospital is a public hospital, and there will be another vote next year on the membership of that. There are people who are running who would like to privatize the hospital. So that's something that we need to work on, but that's something for next year. We'll be working on that. We'll also do some work on maternal health disparities, talking about women. There are women who, particularly women of color, who cannot get proper care when they're pregnant. They're disparaged. They're not listened to. Even a woman like the tennis player, Venus Williams, I think it was Serena Williams, when she was pregnant, she was having a lot of pain, and the doctor didn't take her seriously. So even women with some means, when they are people of color, are not listened to in the same way and not taken care of. So that's another issue that we really need to work on. So I'm sorry to take your time. I know we're running out of time, but please see me afterwards. Yes.
Sir, I just wanted, I think it's important to tell how much it costs to verify each ballot. Do you know
Each
that?
petition, $5 each?
$5 or $6
Yeah.
a petition.
Well, what we do, we have a hub in Sarasota. We have the Universal Unitarian Hub, but we also have Planned Parenthood. And before they send it in, if you give it to, if you mail it in, there may be errors and it may be thrown out, but they will check it and they will make sure that they're correct. I know what sometimes they do, like I've done it myself. Like you look at it and say, oh my God, this woman forgot to sign, or she forgot to put the date in. So I put it in an envelope with another one, and I send it to the person and tell them, and put a self-stamp address envelope in so that it can send it in. But you don't have to do that. But what you do need to really be careful so that you don't have this business of ballots not being validated. But yes, and after we validate them, it goes to the supervisor of election in the county, and then it goes to the state, and then it finally gets approved. So it's a long process. But we did have enough approved to get the to be able to go to the state Supreme Court to get verification to be put on the ballot. And that's another step that you have to go through, because they haven't gotten the answer yet. But there is no reason they will. Every ballot has to be verified in terms of the wording. Is it clear? Is it only dealing with one issue? It's not complicated. This has been prepared by a lot of really good lawyers, and it was actually also worked on by a former Supreme Court justice for the state who helped write this. So I'm sure the wording will pass muster. It's just that we're just waiting for the Attorney General to look at it and to send it to the Supreme Court to be verified.
Carolyn has a question?
I had heard that for each petition that was received, there was a fee to get it processed.
There is a $5 fee approximately to have every single petition approved. Yes.
$5.
Yes.
Has that ever been done for any other petition before?
It's the same for the clean water petition.
And in the past too?
Which is why you can go online, and Florida for reproductive freedom needs money. they have a lot of money, and that's why about 80% of the petitions are being done by paid petition collectors, so you may have seen them in certain places. But we also need the volunteers, but they do need the money for that as well.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here today. Lovely afternoon, lunch together, and then lots of information from Ashley Brown and Ruth Brandwine. Thank you.
Thank you.